know how much I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me. And then secondary to that, I also wanted you to know just how much I appreciate your attitude and the culture and the environment you have in your classroom.
Thanks.
It's always very welcoming. It's always warm. Even when we were videotaping, Coach Brown was comfortable in there. I was comfortable in there. He wasn't used to little people, but still, it's a very inviting environment. So thank you for doing that. So
Sure.
as we start to think about your lesson and the modeling of that lesson, tell me what you thought went really well that day.
The students that I was teaching that day, they're very comfortable trying new things, and they're very comfortable repeating. So they do very well with those type lessons.
Okay.
The one that I was concentrating on at that moment, she is not as comfortable with that. So the other students were repeating, and they were on task. So one I did have to correct during the lesson. So if you were watching that lesson, you would notice that. But I thought it went well for the most part. I'm always trying to work on my pronunciation, and of course, where we live in the South, you know, we tend to extend those sounds.
All right, so I heard you say you felt like students were engaged.
Yes.
Most of them were participating and repeating after you, and I noticed that too. I even jotted down some notes. They were doing a really good job of repeating what you were asking them to repeat, and then also when you got to the part of the lesson where you were using motions like eyebrow, they were pointing to their eyebrow, they were participating, you had typed the keys on the keyboard, they also followed you and copied exactly what you were doing with the motion, so they were very much engaged. So I'm impressed with how engaged they are during that foundational. I love how you do it in a small group so they get that extra attention, and you know, I've seen that multiple times when I've been in your classroom where they're pulled over to the side and you do that rotation, so that ensures that everybody gets more attention to that phonemic awareness and those foundational skills. So I just encourage you to continue doing that and keep that engagement high, because you're doing a really good job with that. And like I said, I love how you are putting them in small groups. And I heard you say also that that young lady wasn't maybe as focused as you'd like for her to be, but I also know that was part of your grouping, because prior to it, you had to switch your groups at the last minute because you had some students that had to leave for speech. So you added that student. So I remember that too. So I guess I want to also add, I like how you group, and your grouping was evident too. And although that student maybe wasn't as focused, you can tell that you're aware of your students and know how you need to group them. So just continue that engagement and continue that grouping that you have going on. Now, even as you were reflecting on what went well, you started talking about the articulation.
Yes.
So is there anything about the lesson that you thought, I wish that I had done this different? I know you asked about stopping, but is there anything in particular as you reviewed the lesson, and I had asked you to kind of look at it under the lens of the articulation video.
Right.
Did you notice anything specific?
Well, I feel like I'm always having to work on my articulation because, of course, you know, as we're from the South, and you know, clipping those sounds, it's a hard thing for us because we're not used to that. We're always putting that swallow in the end, and it's just a hard thing for us.
So when you looked at that, was there any sounds in particular that you noticed? I definitely added it to these sounds, and maybe these are sounds that I might want to look at a little bit more closely.
I'm trying to remember what sounds it was. I have looked at it and written it down in the room, but I have been looking at that, and I actually put it on the board in my room.
Okay.
I can't remember. I'm so
Okay.
sorry.
No, that's okay.
But yes.
That's okay. I remember we were using Ben, and so we had the
Yes.
sound, and then we also had pig,
Yes.
and then we had garbage, and that last silly sentence had grumpily in it. So there was some good sounds, right? So you're talking about clipping those. So you've actually made a note on your board. So it sounds like you've already did some next steps.
Yes.
Okay, so when you're thinking about working on clipping those sounds, what are some other ideas that you have? You've put up a visual reminder, maybe to help you clip. What would be some other things that you think might help you on clipping the sounds to ensure you're given the appropriate model?
I was thinking that video that you sent, I wish I had that all along. And I just wondered if there were other videos that would be helpful for all of us.
Yes, and that is the one, I don't know if you were able to come to that training we had with Miss Carissa and Miss, the two ladies from Putnam County a couple years ago. I don't know if you were able to come to that one, but that's the video that we used in that one. And it's also on the Tennessee Foundational video list, the articulation video.
Okay.
Now, as far as additional videos, I did some research on just articulation on isolated sounds.
Yes.
So I looked up like the L and the G and the B, and it was speech pathologists who are modeling it. And so I pulled some of those off, so I could share some of those with you as a resource. And then also, I plan on trying to reach out to our speech pathologist. Now, does Miss Emily work here or Miss Whitaker? Miss Kelly.
Yes.
Okay, so I plan on reaching out to Miss Kelly and seeing if possibly she could do some training, maybe with all of our pre-K teachers, just on some pronunciation. So that's something that the district could help with too.
Right.
So I've heard you say that you're going to go back and look at that articulation video again. You have a visual reminder. I'll share the isolated videos with the sounds, and then I'm going to follow up with the speech pathologist. Now, one other thing that I like to do when we're talking about our post-conference for pre-K is I always feel like it's very important to connect it to our class observation, because you know, it's our instruction, right? So when we think about your instruction for the foundational skills, obviously it falls into that instructional support domain on your class. And it's the very last one, if you remember, on our little sheet that we use. And at the bottom, there's like language modeling, advanced language, and there is language modeling that fall under that. And so when we think about advanced language, that's the vocabulary that we are using for students. And also under that advanced language and language modeling, it has the self-talk and the parallel talk. And so on the self-talk, we know that that's when I am telling you exactly what I'm doing. So if I'm modeling a sound that requires me to put my tongue in a certain place, then I can say, I'm putting my tongue behind my front teeth. So one of the things I've just tried to share with some of our pre-K teachers to think about within your foundational skills, could you do some self-talk? Could you think about the advanced language, like previewing the lessons and just looking for opportunities for some of the strong words? I know grumpily was in there, and so that might be a word that is a little unfamiliar, so that might have been an advanced language opportunity that you could have just quickly, you know, put in. So I just like to share that so we make that connection. So you might think about in your foundational skills, you know, as you preview that lesson, where could I also look for those opportunities to use strong vocabulary or highlight that for students, or also do some self-talk. Okay. So as we kind of close up, I always like to go back and like revisit and summarize. So what are we going to talk about that are next steps? Again, you want to repeat those back to me, what you expect me to provide for you, and then what you're going to do also when it comes to articulation.
The videos. Definitely. And then going back and using those to clip those sounds. So that we can use those with the children.
And then I always like to finish up with going back to what I have told you that you are doing really well, and I want you to continue. So as we talked about that lesson, tell me something that you heard me say, or a couple things, because I think I highlighted at least 2 things that I think you're doing really, really well with your group. And what are those 2 things?
I heard you say that they were engaged and that the groups were.
Absolutely. You know your students and you were grouping them appropriately, and they were very much engaged. So just keep that up, and I appreciate you all you do, Ms. Stoney. You do a good job with our pre-K students, and I look forward to seeing the articulation to continue to grow. As you said, we live here and we're all working on flipping those sounds, so we'll continue to do that. Thank you. I appreciate it.